This is Trekosophy. Entering the studio are today's contestants. First, we have a political science major from SETI Alpha 5, Brendan Kirby.
Good day.
Then we have a self-sealing stem bolt salesman from Sirius 3, Chris McGee.
Hello.
And lastly, we have a technical holodeck program supervisor from San Francisco, Ben McLean.
Greetings.
And I'm your host, Bill Allen, a.k.a. the guy in the red shirt. This is the Star Trek Philosophy Podcast, and tonight is episode 14. Tonight's topic is our Star Trek revival pitch idea. It's been, 5 years, almost 7 years? How long has it been since there's been a Star Trek television show on? When did Enterprise actually end?
I thought it was 10 years.
Has it really been 10 years?
Well, I think it ended in 2005. The final
To
season
memory
was
alpha.
2004, 2005.
Okay. So that's 7 years.
So it's been 7 years. That's a long time without any Star Trek. And even though the Enterprise tended to not do so well as previous Star Trek shows, being so radically different, the new Star Trek movie has hit theaters, a sequel is in the works, and there's a chance that Star Trek might be coming back. So tonight we're going to be talking about what we would like to see, what we think would make a great show, what we think would also make a horrible show, but we're going to watch it anyway.
What would be so bad that we wouldn't watch it?
Yes. And tonight I think we ought to start by talking about Michael Dorn.
Yeah, Michael Dorn, he came out with just floating a balloon that said, I want to make my own show. And all the Star Trek fans were like, yes, do it. Yes, please do it. And all the Hollywood people were like, I don't know. That might not make enough money. And we haven't heard much about it since, except it did generate quite a bit of hype. It would kind of contradict something Cisco said on DS9, which was that Worf would probably never get his own command. This would be making him have his own command, which is cool with me. I mean, I don't that kind of thing doesn't stick anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure they could come up
people.
with some sort of backstory how he was able to get his own command or something.
Yeah, like in an emergency or something.
I don't put too much stock into you'll have your own command, because Captain Kirk sabotaged a state-of-the-art Federation starship, stole another Federation starship, fought his way out of Starbase 1, and basically at the end of it, they said, well, you did save the galaxy, so just don't do it again. And they gave him a brand new ship.
Well, he's the Shatner. I mean, the rules don't apply to him.
Well, not only do the rules not apply to him, did not Cisco end that episode by saying, if it were Jennifer, I would have made the exact same decision as Worf did.
Yep.
I mean, the reason why he would never get another commander is because he chose Jadzia over the well-being of Starfleet. But, whoever is making the decision to give him his own command, if that person has a wife or a husband, they might be lenient towards him making the decision.
Yeah.
I would accept it as a Trekker. Like, I wouldn't be so nitpicky as to say, no, I don't like that. You said in one phrase in one episode that nobody remembers that this would never happen. Well, I'd get over it if it was a good show.
And also, I mean, it's only the canon is that this was said, not that it's true. Just that it was said.
Yeah.
So yeah. Any details come out on that at all? I mean, other than Michael Dorn wants to make a Star Trek show with Worf as captain. Do we know anything else?
I haven't heard anything else, but let me.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much, we haven't got much to talk about other than
well, I mean, I'd like to say that I think Michael Dorn cast as a werewolf in the Castlevania movie. There's a news blurb for you.
Wow.
He's been busy making appearances on other television series, so he's still active. It might just be a scheduling conflict thing. It might be something in the back of his head. The one thing that worries me, though, is that this is going to be another Richard Hatch situation.
Another what?
I don't know if you're familiar with the original Battlestar Galactica ending.
Oh my ass.
Yes.
That was with Lorne Greene. Richard Hatch was the guy who played Apollo. And some years ago, he was working on a pitch. He was working on a script. He was trying to get the pieces in place to make a follow-up series to Battlestar Galactica, which was supposed to be the original crew. And it's been 20 years, and here's where they are now. I don't know if it was meant to be a mini series or if it was going to be an ongoing series, but he wanted to pick up the story of the Battlestar Galactica some 20 odd years later.
I guess they're just going to completely forget about what was it, Galactica 1980? That
honestly, I'd like to completely forget about
yeah,
that
I don't
too,
blame you
because
either.
It was
I did watch it though.
Two separate. The original Galactica 1980 miniseries was like, okay, now he's traveling back in time to various periods in Earth's history to change things, and that was the first 3 or 4 episodes, and then there was no more mention of time travel at all. It was 2 new guys filling in for Starbuck and Apollo, and it's all about the Space Boy Scouts.
Uh,
It
The
was your
Space
typical
Scouts.
1980 show, you know. It's pretty awful.
okay.
But when they came out with the new Battlestar Galactica, Richard Hatch was highly upset. He was bad-mouthing it in the press left and right because they had pretty much crushed any chance of his revival series getting up and running. And you started to get the idea that this guy was kind of pulling the old, I used to be a high school football quarterback kind of thing, trying to hold on to his old glory instead of moving on to something new. And he was a little bit conceited about it. I mean, I'm still kind of wondering why all of a sudden, just because they gave him a kind of important role in the new Battlestar Galactica series, then he started talking about what a great show it was.
Well, it
And
really was a great show.
it was. I enjoyed it. It was really good.
Well, it
But,
was epically good, but I think, somebody who's a purist for the show might object to it at first. In the same way, a lot of the original series, people objected to the Next Generation at first, but then when you see, okay, this is what it's all about, you come to appreciate it.
us fans are like that. If it's not exactly the way it was 20 years ago, we're not going to like it.
My
But
goodness,
we'll like it, but we'll pretend not to like it.
I can think of 4 idiots who did a show called Trekosophy on why Enterprise wasn't so good because the theme music wasn't orchestral. We like things.
Hey! I'm
Ooh,
not
I
one of
wonder who
those.
said that.
I thought the Enterprise theme music was okay.
You're
I
on
would-
audio recording.
Yeah, we've got it recorded.
Yeah, I didn't say that. It didn't feel like Star Trek, but it was okay. I mean, that wasn't one of my complaints about Enterprise. There's enough stuff about Enterprise that you can totally diss
My point is,
without even bringing that up.
though, that some people can be very much purists, and then once the new show comes in and it grips you and it's captivating and it's engaging, you warm up to it despite the initial cold reaction. So Richard Hatch, yeah, sure, maybe we see this ulterior motivation where he gets a role in the new show and he's all fine with it. But the thing is, somebody who is a purist and says, no, I don't want this new show where it's totally different and Starbuck isn't even in the same gender. They see the new show. Actually, no, this new show is some of the best sci-fi I've ever seen, and then they warm up to it. So too, do I think we could be that way with the new Star Trek show?
Yeah, I'll agree with that, but only to a point, because at the same time, the things that made Star Trek great, even if it's a new and different show, I worry that they're going to try to copy that Battlestar Galactica feel.
Oh, they certainly will.
Did anybody watch Stargate Universe?
Yes,
No.
I have.
I
The
didn't.
Stargate movie, the first one, and then like the
Um,
first episode or two of the first show, and that's all I've seen of Stargate.
Okay, because they had well, you had the movie, and then you had the series that was based on the movie that starred Richard Dean Anderson.
That's true.
Then you had a spin-off series about adventures in the another galaxy, and they came out with Stargate Universe. And for Stargate Universe, they went with the grim and gruesome, dark and gritty, realistic feel of Battlestar Galactica. I mean, Battlestar Galactica has become its own kind of genre as far as the film style goes. And even though it was the same production team, the same writers, the same directors, the new Stargate show just didn't do well. I mean, there are aspects of that kind of storytelling that can do good in a show, but sometimes you lose more than you gain by changing the style too much.
Does anybody have, or okay, how about let's actually
I
get
agree.
to our actual pitches?
Yeah,
I mean,
we were just
okay.
kind of talking about how fans
Because
would
we've been
react
talking
to
for a while, and I'm
Michael
afraid
Dorn's.
it's going to get late and we won't get through it.
Oh, well,
right.
I've got an idea for the new show. It's
Let's
something that
start
ties
with-
in with Trekosophy. It's an idea. We can talk about my idea for Occupation Earth. But another idea I had was it would be really neat if one of the officers on the show were to engage in a regular discussion with a philosopher on the holodeck, the same way you saw Data interact with Newton, Einstein, and Stephen Hawking. I thought, on a regular basis, there'll be some sort of a metaphysical question that comes up, and then he could go ask Aquinas about some sort of proof in metaphysics, or an ethical question, and they could talk to Kant or Mill or Nietzsche. I thought that could be something that would raise the intellect of the show, and I think that's something that's something common that Star Trek does.
Janeway Da Vinci.
Exactly. It would be that, except for awesome, because Janeway's not involved.
Ooh.
I liked Janeway. She's like my second favorite captain.
Well,
Let's not
you
go
don't
there.
even get the Jeopardy consolation prize because of that.
You could also, I thought what might be neat is having a alien invisible to everybody but one crewman who's following him around to study humans while the humans are studying space.
Voyager did an episode on that because Voyager sucks.
Yeah, Voyager had some odd episodes. They had great stories. I don't know why that show didn't. It just didn't zing the way the other shows did. But no, to stick with your idea, not go off on a tangent too much yet. It would be neat to see more holodeck conversations. Kind of still have the crisis thing, but not every episode is about the crisis. It's about taking the time to think things through, because a lot of Star Trek crises are we've got 5 minutes until a ship explodes and the whole solar system goes up in flames, so how do we fix this? Stick them in those situations where they have time to think and they have to moralize over
Give
the
them some
details,
more
slow
moral
it down a bit.
dilemmas rather than just the fighting something dilemmas.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey,
But still have the fighting.
maybe we should have like an officer who all their job is the ship holographic systems and the cloaking device, if any. Holography, like the holography officer.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean,
You get
I was
Barkley
thinking
on
it
it.
would be cool to. Oh yeah, someone like Barkley. But the one of the things that would be cool about that is you could have an actual. Wasn't there a ship that was like a holo ship near the end of Star Trek somewhere? I seem to remember there being a ship that was basically a giant flying holodeck.
Yeah, in the it was what was the name of it? It was that
Insurrection.
prototype ship from Voyager that could separate into 3 pieces. They had moved hollow emitters
Oh, the
throughout
multi-vector
the ship.
assault mode, the Prometheus.
The Prometheus, thank you. The Prometheus had hollow emitters spread throughout the ship so that emergency medical program could go anywhere and not just sickbay, because Prometheus was a warship and they were expecting to take heavier casualties.
Okay.
Right.
So how about I give you my crazy idea along those lines? Okay, my pitch is um, the Federation has mostly explored the Milky Way galaxy and wants to send a ship off to another galaxy because they know how to get outside the galactic barrier, and they've got some kind of warpy thingy that'll get them completely outside of Federation space to another nearby galaxy. And they have a new prototype kind of ship that hasn't existed before, in which the whole ship there's hollow emitters throughout the entire ship, and the all the ship's controls are holographic. And so so the holodeck's on a separate system or anything like that. It is the ship. The whole ship is a holodeck, and and instead of going on away missions like directly, you send a holographic emitter down to the surface, while you yourself, aren't in actual danger, at least not directly, for that kind of thing. At least for your first encounter and for dangerous missions, right? Or missions that are supposed to be dangerous. That way the captain actually can interact with directly instead of sending the first officer, like the whole Riker thing. So anyway, my captain would be Elijah Wood. I would get Elijah Wood to be the captain, and he'd be playing a human, because I really think the captain needs to be, in some ways, the captain, I think, really does need to be an Earth person.
Needs to be relatable.
He served what?
He needs to be relatable.
Yes, needs to be relatable. He needs to serve as a viewpoint character for the audience a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And so that's why I think it's important to have a Earth captain, and not have the captain not have a total disconnect between the audience's perspective and the captain's perspective. I would have a Binars be on the crew. Binars
Cool.
are a race from the Next Generation who we only saw in, I think, one episode. We never heard from them again. But they're basically a race of computer-enhanced beings who always must work in pairs. Their brains are like wired to work in pairs. So you don't interact with one Binar. There are two of them together at all times who exist as one person in two bodies, pretty much. And so everything about Starfleet would have to accommodate that aspect of the Binars, and that would be a weirdly interesting angle to portray. And of course, they would be the Spock character, in that they're the coldly logical type character on the show. And I was thinking we'd get Keegan Delancey as Little Q, and he would be a regular on the show because he would make an offer to the captain in the first episode along the lines of the offer Q makes in Q Who, that he would explore outside the galaxy with them by renouncing at least some of his powers. And he's more responsible than Q, and the Elijah Wood captain actually takes him up on it. And so they actually he doesn't have omnipotence, and he gives up his knowledge of the future. He's got it like sort of locked in this sort of metaphysical box. And the older John Delancey, who would be a guest, he's got the keys to it. So every now and then, John Delancey will appear in a kind of sort of vision to Keegan, and tell him what's coming up, right? Because older Q knows the future, knows what's going to happen. And so there's all kinds of interesting stuff you could play with that from a writing perspective.
No doubt.
Yeah. So that there's another character. I was thinking of having a Vulcan doctor, or not a Vulcan doctor, more of a Romulan doctor. A sort of Romulan Vulcan hybrid kind of doctor. It's not the cold logical, but he has the cultural background giving him all kinds of issues, or her. It might be a lady, but it explores the borders between Vulcans and Romulans and how would they approach all this different stuff. And I might try to have some kind of Klingon character too. I don't know. And I would add some kind of new race, but the Binars, they're so underdeveloped. I don't know if I really need to introduce any new aliens on this crew. So that's basically my idea, and yeah, that's my idea for a revival pitch. And so things back in the Milky Way galaxy are going pretty well, but but they're sending ships out to explore further, and there's probably
What's
some
the,
kind of alien race that might invade if they don't stop them or something.
What's the time frame for this? What years? And
Oh, just a few years after the end of Voyager.
okay,
Kate Mulgrew would probably appear on the show as Admiral Janeway every so often, as little screen.
Do they have the Milky Way galaxy charted?
Well, not entirely, but they have enough information about the four quadrants that doing a whole other show about them. I mean, we visited all four quadrants in Star Trek already, and they're not. We know enough about them that doing a new show in another quadrant might be problematic because you could run into a lot of stuff. Of course, I think I might have like a bunch, weird. If you want to put the Enterprise, or if you want to put this isn't the Enterprise, by the way. This is a new ship. But if you want to put a Star Trek crew in any situation, just open a wormhole to send them there. And one episode I'd really want to do is a revisit to the gangster planet from.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course now they're like hip hop type gangstas instead of gangsters.
oh Lord.
And, yeah.
Well, if you remember the end of that episode, McCoy left his
That's exactly what I was just
communicator
thinking.
behind. And so they kind of tried to drop hints that what they were going to end up doing was, instead of copying mobs of the 20s, they were going to build their own little mini federation. So you could end up dealing with the 22nd century version of the Federation.
Maybe. But
And
they
have
still
national Fizbin tournaments every year.
yeah.
Yeah.
They'd still have to have some kind of connection with organized crime for the episode to even be relevant to the old show at all. So we want to keep some of the organized crime stuff going on. But yeah, they might have some of that going on too. I was thinking they'd have become a spacefaring people. They'd just be on the edge of warp drive at the point.
I think that would be a really interesting concept insofar as it would provide the writers with the foundation to enter into something wholly other, where they could actually be explorers. Even with their imaginations, they could be explorers, because you're encountering something totally new with other galaxies. I think that's really keeping with the spirit of Star Trek.
That's what I was going for. I was wanting to keep to formula, pretty heavily keep to formula with new gadgets.
Yeah.
And
It's
also Elijah
totally,
Wood's a lot of fun.
It's
He'd probably
something
be awesome
totally
at it.
different. Yeah.
Maybe they could
You know-
even visit Galaxy M33, which the Enterprise visited very briefly, and where no one has gone before.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Another thing I'd want to do is I'd want to arrange a crossover episode. The one like they've always wanted to do ever since the '60s. Crossover episode with Doctor Who.
Would you really?
Yeah.
No,
TARDIS
you
totally.
wouldn't.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious. I would have Doctor Who, whoever the current Doctor is, in a crossover episode.
They did just
I'm not kidding.
back in June release a Doctor Who Star Trek crossover comic book.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
going to say, I
Opened
heard
up.
about some comic books.
Yeah, I mean there was an attempt to try to get an actual crossover episode with Doctor Who on the original series, but it never came together though. Too much legal crap going on with the lawyers.
Yeah, was Doctor Who that big in the U.S. in the '60s?
No.
I don't know, probably not, but they wanted to do it anyway.
Because they did. I remember there was what was that old? There was the episode where they actually ended up going back in time to 1966, and they met that guy who was
Gary 7.
Gary 7. Yes, was that a crossover or was that an attempt at making a spin-off?
The
It
latter.
was an attempt at making a spin-off.
Okay.
The latter.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Well, I think they had in mind the idea that Star Trek was going to be canceled, but Roddenberry wanted to make a new series, and so he was going to make a new series based on this Gary 7 character.
Who
But for
was
some-
an alien living on Earth trying to protect humanity from its mistakes or something like that.
Well, I think he was a human living off of Earth, and he was trying to protect humanity. But the point is, that series I don't believe ever manifested, or it never materialized, rather. And Star Trek continued on for another season. Thankfully.
And featured a very young Terry Garr, too.
C'est qui? It's who? I'm speaking with
Terry Garr.
I
Terry
can't
Garr.
speak French every so often. But Terry, who's that?
Just some actress. Normally you don't see her in.
Was she Roberta?
She was the secretary in that show. I can't remember her name.
Roberta, I think was her name.
Yeah, well, I'd want to get
Anyway.
on this show, I'd want to get beloved actors from the old shows on as much as could possibly be justified, because fans love that, and you got to give the people what they want. And I definitely want to have Odo returning at some point. The guy who plays Odo, Rene, what's his name? He'd probably be a lot older now, but that should be okay.
And the makeup will hide that.
Yeah, or even if he can't return in character, getting that actor back at some point would be great. And I mean, yeah, just
Okay.
actors from the old shows as much as we can.
Well, can I pitch my idea
Yeah.
and we can
Yeah.
compare and contrast? I'm next.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, you've already heard my idea about the Philosopher's Zone, the holodeck. But the other idea I had, and my goodness, I've never actually articulated this to anybody, so I apologize if I'm a bit sloppy. But I had in mind the concept of this Star Trek Occupation Earth. I think, was it Bill or Chris? Somebody called it Star Trek Occupation Earth. But
That
I
was
really,
me. Yeah.
I really like the way it was put. The series would start out with a Dominion invasion coming that doesn't look like it's going to succeed in overcoming Earth. But a changeling has mysteriously infiltrated Earth with all of its defense networks, and they shut down as the fleet approaches. And so the Earth is easily overcome by the Dominion. And the series progresses with this, I think, a pessimistic attitude being inculcated in Earth for the first time, where they actually experience the concept of not just defeat, but the concept of captivity and a loss of their freedom. So the point of the show would be trying to deal with this, not paradigm shift, but the shift in the mindset, where we were once arrogant but no longer. We actually have to be realists and deal with problems that were in the 20th century that we thought we had overcome, but no, we didn't. That's the idea. Feel free to dissect, criticize, analyze.
Well, I'd like to say that I honestly thought that was going to be the next Star Trek series as the fifth and sixth seasons of Deep Space Nine progressed and the things started looking grimmer and grimmer. When they announced that seven was the final final season, I was thinking that they're not going to be able to wrap everything up neatly in 1 year. This is going to end either with a serious cliffhanger where the war's got to be with a new cliffhanger, or the Federation is actually going to lose. And I thought that would be an interesting show. What happens when the Federation loses the war and the Dominion controls the Alpha Quadrant?
Especially
And
when the
it would
Marine they attacked Starfleet headquarters close to the end of the series too.
Right?
Yeah, and it was, and instead they went with that horrid Deus Ex Machina ending that just I still can't stand to this day. But they wrapped it up. We won. Yay us. What we do. But I mean, it would have made for an interesting show just to see what humans are really like when you take away
Their creature
all their
comforts.
little trinkets and creature comforts. I mean, sort of give it a little bit of a Lord of the Flies vibe, and to put that positive spin on it, yeah, we're going to get brutal, we're going to get savage, make the Klingons think, wow, you guys are a little too violent for us.
Yeah.
But we're still going to hold on to our humanity. We're just going to be a little bit grittier with it.
Yeah.
I like that.
I mean, that's what I had in mind. Well, grittier, a little bit more darker, a little bit more realistic, a little bit more First Contact, where you have this arrogant and downright ignorant character with Picard in Next Generation all of a sudden be put in a situation where his reflections, his ideas don't actually pan out. To me, that would be, I don't want to say self-satisfying, but it would at least affirm some of those aspects of human nature that Star Trek has allegedly purged, which in Deep Space Nine and in First Contact, I said, well, no, we didn't really. To explore that a little bit further, I think would make for a good drama, good TV. But Crewman Benjamin, you're saying that's not really Star Trek?
Yeah, that was my objection. My objection to the whole Occupation Earth idea is I don't see how this connects in any way with the whole rest of Star Trek. I mean, thematically, I don't understand what putting Star Trek in the title of this actually brings to the table. Why not write a story about a futuristic Earth being occupied by an alien force from scratch? I mean,
well, because there's already one from a pragmatic standpoint, there's a built-in fan base, but there's also an established political environment.
How? I mean, you're completely demolishing the established political environment. So
not at all. The Jem'Hadar are in the Gamma Quadrant. They have a foreseeable means whereby they could overcome the defenses of Earth. I don't understand.
With the lore already established on so many previous series, it would save time to get the show up and running full speed because you don't have to spend quite so much time on the backstory.
Absolutely. You could even have human betrayers, like with the genetically enhanced folks, betray Earth to the Dominion because they would see it as inevitable anyways, this sort of thing.
That's right.
I mean, that's already been established. So you could get right into the action, right into the drama without throwing together a backstory.
On the
well, if I was a television network, there's no way I would see that as an advantage because a show like this is going to a show like this is going to need new viewers who have never seen Star Trek before, especially with the big gap since the old series is. And bringing all that in isn't an advantage from a perspective of making a show popular. I mean, you can't give the audience too much homework. You can give fan service to the fans, but you also have to appeal to completely new people.
Oh, I
And
agree with that.
yeah, I mean, it seems like the new people. I don't know. It seems like new people, the old people are gonna like it because it's not in the same formula. And the new people aren't gonna like it because they won't be able to figure out what the heck's going on.
Well,
Well, I
one thing that I would like to interject here is that when I first heard about Deep Space Nine and the fact that this new show was going excuse me, going to take place entirely on a space station that doesn't move, I was up in arms and thought, how the hell can they do a show like this? It doesn't go anywhere. And what happens? It's one of the best, if not the best, in my opinion, show of the whole Star Trek franchise.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's
But
okay if you
it
change
also,
things up and do something completely unexpected. Sometimes it works,
yeah,
sometimes it doesn't.
but also, DS9 took place in a place that hadn't been explored very much by the Star Trek universe at that point, and which even if you didn't understand all the politics of the Federation coming out of Wolf 359 and so on, you could follow the stock military cliches and get the gist just from watching Emissary of where things are at, even if you hadn't watched The Next Generation. You might not get all of what's going on in the conversation between Cisco and Picard, but the rest of the episode you could get pretty much get. But this new thing seems like it would depend on having a pretty heavy level of insider knowledge of
Well, you
old,
could
the old
always, in the
shows.
pilot episode, you could have the characters give some backstory in their conversations. You can always have some exposition to take
Well,
care
there's
of that.
another point I'd want to make too about whether or not it's proper to name it Star Trek. And the truth is, everybody here has their conception of what Star Trek is. I mean, Tim would argue that Star Trek is about scientific rationalism, overcoming superstition, and it overcomes the elements that face humanity, and there's a triumph of the human intellect. But along comes Deep Space Nine and Voyager, where we don't make room for this so much anymore. Somebody says Star Trek is about exploration. Along comes Deep Space Nine, where they're just sitting there. Along comes Enterprise, where they're exploring something that we already know, and we know how it's going to turn out. So we can all have our concepts of what Star Trek is supposed to be like, but Star Trek is constantly reinventing itself. The last movie, which I was offended by as a lifelong Star Trek fan, is now reinventing what Star Trek is. I mean, Star Trek is something that can reinvent itself.
Wait, why are we? You're not offended by a lot of the stuff Enterprise did, but you are
No.
offended by J. Abrams' movie.
Well, I am. I am as a Star Trek fan. I would say, as a Star Trek fan, I would say, no, you can't have Deep Space Nine. Well, they did it anyways, with or without my permission. As a Star Trek fan, I say, no, the new J.J. Abrams movie, that's terrible. Well, they're going to make it anyways, with or without my permission. I'm still going to watch it, so they make it. And now that's Star Trek. Star
I
Trek
know a
is
lot
what
of
it is,
people.
with or without your
I know.
permission, with or without your consent. Star Trek
Well,
is
we
what
don't
it
want
is.
to play the role of the network executive too much in here because we're going to start finding faults in every one of our pitches. We're going to start
Okay,
saying,
well,
"Oh, well, you
it
can't do
seems
this
like
because of this. You can't do this because of that."
yeah. Well, it seems to
I'd like
me
to,
like Occupation Earth would do a lot better as a new franchise.
I'd like to say, for our listening audience at home, this conversation actually got started as a Facebook dialogue between Ben and Brandon, on the subject, and which is part of why we pushed this particular episode up in our queue so quick so they could have it on the air. And in that Facebook conversation, Ben did make a good point about it being about Star Trek should be about exploration. As far as defending this idea of Brandon's, I would say that there's two possible ways this show could have played out that would have had that exploration element attached to it. One is they're exploring humanity, because humanity is the one aspect that doesn't really get looked at anymore. It just kind of is. And we're exploring the inner workings of what really makes a human when you take away all their little surface actions. Or if you really want to show about exploration, you have this crew that manages to steal a 50-year-old ship and get it up and running, and they're out there in the galaxy desperately looking for new allies or new technology or something that could save Earth and the Federation from the Dominion. So you would still have exploration, but you would also have that element of desperation attached to it.
Oh,
Well, you
okay.
know, I
That
Really
retract-
close to my pitch there.
I never
I'm sorry,
actually did clarify that, because in my pitch, for some reason I neglected to mention that I did think it would be really useful to have like a Captain Chakotay type, where he is the captain of a ship that was forced to retreat in the battle for Earth, and it's about his trying to retake the captured Earth.
Okay, that sounds very Battlestar Galactica, but
Of course, it's very Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica is awesome and is now the new standard for sci-fi.
I'd also like to mention, I think part of the reason why Deep Space Nine, even though it was a radical departure from the Star Trek motif, I think part of why it was so successful as a Star Trek show was because of Babylon 5. Did any of you guys ever watch any of Babylon 5?
Yes, I
I
have.
finished with the first season, but I'm trying to watch the other 4 seasons. I think there are.
Mhm.
No.
When it went live, when it originally aired, it aired on the same network as Deep Space Nine. It was before the CW became the CW. They were something else. And they had Babylon 5, they had Deep Space Nine, they had Kung Fu, The Legend Continues. This really impressive lineup of sci-fi, fantasy type shows. And it was interesting that 2 of them were about space stations. You had Babylon 5, which was about a space station where they were trying to play UN, and then you had Deep Space Nine, which was a space station that was trying to play Star Trek. And I think part of why Deep Space Nine ended up being successful as a Star Trek show was because people had another show about a space station to compare it to. If there had been no Babylon 5, I don't think Deep Space Nine would have been as successful as it was. It would have gone too far away from that Star Trek feel.
Well, I hate to burst your bubble, but unfortunately, Deep Space Nine wasn't really as successful as any of the other shows. It didn't quite gain the audience that The Next Generation did, despite the fact that it was a better show.
Well, it still gained enough of an audience that they greenlit a full series of it. I mean, it didn't kill the franchise.
No,
And
yeah,
I
that's
think that could speak to the shifts in cable. Like the Next Generation had phenomenal ratings compared to Enterprise or Battlestar or whatever. But the truth is, there weren't that many networks back then either.
That
Yeah.
could have been a contributing factor.
I mean, I'm a huge WWE fan, and if you look at the ratings back in the 80s, which was one show did 33 million viewers. And now if they get 4 million, they're thrilled. Well, it just speaks to the shifts in the reality of cable network more
Hey,
than anything.
that just reminded me something I forgot to mention about my pitch. I would suggest doing whatever the next Star Trek show is in CG, like the Star Wars, the Clone Wars. Maybe not that same style of CG, but the concept of doing a sci-fi show in CG, it just makes sense with all of the special effects that are expected in science fiction. Just all of that together, the cost of all of that really seems like Star Trek would do well to do a CG show.
Well, that could be.
Okay, now it's time for. I kind of interrupted Chris before he could put his idea out there, and then I stepped on it before he could say it. But I want to hear Chris's.
Yeah.
Are we done with Brandon's idea here?
I hope so.
Okay.
And I'm Brandon.
All right. So the idea, the pitch that I came up with was, I'm glad so far I haven't heard anyone come up with their little fanboy thing of, yeah, and then Deep Space Nine meets Babylon 5, and then the Serenity docks there, and then SG-1 steps out of the Stargate, and stuff like that. That's the typical fanboy, fanfic stuff. What I would probably do is I would have a show be more about a band of mercenaries, not the Federation as we're so used to seeing. Probably will take place maybe 80 or so years ahead of Voyager. But the thing is, this is a band of mercenaries that, kind of like Firefly, I guess you could say, in a way. They're in this old beat-up ship. It's rusting. You got to kick it to make it go sometimes. Things like that. Ragtag team. And they have to, maybe in a way, you could also have it where they'll be smuggling, and so they have to avoid the Federation. In a way, we'd have to put the Federation in a sort of bad light. Since we're trying to root for our heroes here, it'll be the first time that we'll actually see Starfleet be the guys we want to avoid and not have catch them. Things like that. I don't think. I mean, I have no idea who I would cast in it. I'm not familiar with the current actors around, so we probably wouldn't need an open casting call for this.
Well, if you're gonna do,
idea.
if you're gonna do space pirates, you need a space Johnny Depp.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have whoever the captain is. He's gonna have to fall in the tradition of Kirk and Picard and Malcolm Reynolds, and be the ruggedly handsome kind of guy that you come to expect.
Well, I
for
meant,
the captain.
Johnny Depp with all the in and out lying to you by telling you the truth stuff.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah. You're gonna have plenty of that in there.
Well, I hear that. I hear that the movie studio wasn't that impressed with Green Lantern and planning on a sequel. So Ryan Reynolds might be available as your captain.
Well, I mean Malcolm Reynolds. I just hope that we don't have the show on Fox where they'll cancel it after 13 episodes or something.
Yeah.
Weren't they going to put Ryan Reynolds in the Deadpool movie?
If they ever make the Deadpool movie.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, you'd want a captain who is three things: swashbuckling, sexy, and awesome.
Yeah. And he's got to play that part. That you'd be a special kind of person to do that, I think.
It almost sounds like it would be like a parody, almost. I mean, it sounds like it'd be goofy, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It sounds a lot closer to Star Trek than Occupation Earth did to me. Well, I don't know. Occupation Earth. Well, yeah, Occupation Earth was more Battlestar than Star Trek. It seems like, why not have them find Earth on Battlestar Galactica and do this as a Battlestar Galactica spinoff? I mean, I don't know. Anyway, but I need to talk about your space pirates thing. Where would they spend most of their time? in terms of in the Star Trek universe? Where would they spend most of their time?
Basically, they would only have their ship. They wouldn't have like a home base the way that the Enterprise had Starfleet back at San Francisco or any of the star bases. Many of them they don't have
Wouldn't
a home except for their ship, and it's an old
wouldn't there be a no, wouldn't there be a space Tortuga?
a Wahoo.
Tortuga, the island where there's the pirate town where all the pirates hang out that the Royal Navy doesn't know
Oh, well,
about
there's
in the Pirates
plenty
of the
of
Caribbean.
seedy bars and places you can go. We've seen our fair share of them in Next Generation and Deep Space
Right.
Nine.
Right.
Oh yeah, and you'd have that one band from Star Wars that keeps going.
And of course, you'd have to give Quark a cameo for a few episodes.
Oh, absolutely, he's got to be in
Absolutely.
there. And yeah, we definitely will have some cameos show up in there in the show.
Oh yeah.
Would you do it in CG?
I would not do
Or
it in CG. I would want it to be as real as possible. Now, maybe some of the battle scenes or whatever in space can be CG. That's fine.
but you mean you want most of the scenes to be shot live action?
Yeah, I want the characters out to be live action. I don't want CG there.
It sounds like there's a high potential, like for drama, for interesting stories, for like high emotion. I
That's what I'm hoping
definitely,
for.
yeah,
Would you
yeah.
have like an embittered former Starfleet guy on your crew?
I mean, I hate to use this comparison, but if you think of Firefly mixed with Star Trek, that's kind of what I'm envisioning here.
Okay, okay.
Would you have like a Ferengi on the crew?
You probably would need one, I think.
Yeah, if you're going to sell cargo, you need the Ferengi
Yeah.
Maybe that's
or
where
an
Well,
Orion slave
that
girl.
would be cool, like a sort of a Firefly an idea with Firefly, but set within the Star Trek universe, whereby it would be like a Star Trek Cassidy Yates. Okay,
Yeah.
what's it like in the Star Trek universe from the perspective of a freighter captain?
Yeah, or just a lot of civilian. What do civilians deal with? Because as I understand it, all this beaming up all the time and going or anywhere you want is more a thing that's just for those Starfleet officers. And most of the people in the Federation aren't able to get anywhere they want that
Yeah,
easily.
probably military-owned technology.
Yeah, so I mean, Starfleet's supposed to have the best ships and the best everything, pretty much in the universe of spacefaring people. Anyway, there's people with better technology, but they don't really explore all that much. So, so yeah, it would be how does the other half live?
Exactly.
So you'd have an Orion woman on the crew.
Oh, she'd just take over the whole place then. She would.
Well, yeah, I mean, she'd play the 7 of 9 role.
Oh, we could do a Star Trek Orion woman show for all that matters.
That'll be on the Playboy channel.
Well, there's an Orion woman in the DS9 relaunch series who is an interesting character actually. How does she gets liberated? She doesn't want to be liberated, but she gets liberated from being a slave, and so she has to adjust to the kinds of adjustments she has to make to her life are kind of interesting. She's really crafty and tricky and stuff, but at the same time, she's never had to figure out her own plans really before. So, it's interesting.
Well, Enterprise actually did a really interesting episode on the Orion slave girls.
That was one of the best Enterprise episodes, and there weren't that many that I really liked that much. So that's saying a lot.
Well, it was one of my favorite. I think it was season 4, where it turns out the Orion slave girls, they were slave girls.
Yeah,
they
it's
sort
called
of
Bound.
lose you in the classification because
Yeah, that was all about
they
Hegelianism.
enslave. Yeah, it was about Hegelianism. They enslave people. They are not themselves slaves. It's the men who are the slaves.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Hegelian master-slave dialectic is that the masters need the slaves, but the slaves don't need the masters. So who is really in control of who?
In the Hegelian relationship, I think would be an interesting episode for your show, Chris, because you could have Starfleet people who are hunting you down, but at the same time, they're going to need the resources from the freighter captains.
There could definitely
And
be
so it
some.
could be the freighter captains who are really, you could have like a labor union struggle, like you saw in that awesome show, Battlestar Galactica. I don't know. It's just there's a lot of potential when you put that forward. I'm thinking there's an awful lot of potential for there to be some interesting storylines there.
Yeah, I mean, that would really be outside the box, but I could see it being Star Trek. I mean, yeah, I mean,
They'll have to. Maybe they'll have some underhanded dealings with the Romulans, perhaps, not just staying within the Federation races.
oh, here's a cool idea. The pirates discover a Borg plan to invade, but the circumstances under which they discover it are incriminating to them. So if they tell, if they tell that they've seen this, that they know about this, then they'd be in trouble. But if they don't tell, then all these people could die, and so they're in this weird situation.
Yeah, nice moral dilemma there.
Be cool.
Have them stuck with an ancient and powerful Iconian artifact for a while. Everybody wants a piece of the crew now because they've got the Iconian technology.
Exactly. That'd
All
be
right,
cool
well,
too.
That's my pitch. I guess we're up to Bill now.
Okay. I actually had 4. I don't know if it's just too much of a trek here. Yeah, well, I'll list them in order from what I think would be the worst show to what I think would be the best show. And I'll start with, I think you guys have heard me mention this before, Marauder Mo, the animated series.
Yep.
What?
A show about Ferengi, but it's a cartoon, and it's one of those goofy, silly Saturday morning cartoons. It's going to be silly Star Trek. You're going to have, I mean, I'd like to have Rom make occasional cameo appearances or at least voice work as the Grand Nagus, since he is the new Nagus. And it'd be a cartoon about a bunch of Ferengi misfits out exploring the galaxy and trying to make a quick buck and never quite managing. Something always goes wrong. So Marauder Mo is the Charlie Brown of the Federation of Star Trek.
So
the name comes from a couple of mentions on Deep Space Nine. Marauder Mo was action figure line of collectible toys. The first time we run into the Ferengi, they were kind of hardcore little tough guys. They had the laser whips. They really were marauders. And then eventually, over the course of a couple of series, they turned into Weasley sniveling little negotiators. But Marauder Mo was the name of those action figures that Quark collected. And if you have an action figure line, if you have a toy line, you're going to make a cartoon about that toy line to sell more toys.
Of course.
So you could work in a couple of fake commercials for Ferengi products. So, a commercial for Sluggo Cola, a commercial for self-sealing stem bolts to lead into each episode, a fake ad.
Yeah.
And then you have this goofy cartoon.
That'll suck in the kids while they're young, get them interested in Star Trek before you land them with the heavy stuff.
And if you do it well enough, you'd have jokes that adults and fans of the show would relate to and remember.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like the Superhero Squad show of Marvel Comics.
Yes, and that's kind of the style of artwork I would want. Or like the artwork they used for Teen Titans, where the heads would swell up to 50 times normal whenever they got the emotional
stuff. The chibi stuff.
Yeah, the TV cartoon for Teen Titans, where they did that over-the-top anime emoticon thing.
Well, that was sort of that stuff was sort of in jokes for anime fans. It wasn't original to Teen Titans,
Right.
but Teen Titans was brilliant stuff. That's got to be one of the best things they've ever put on TV. I mean, Teen Titans was awesome. So don't insult Teen Titans.
No, but I mean it was a goofy show. They took because they've got Young Justice, which is Teen Titans as a serious version.
Yeah, and I liked how Teen Titans had a balance going on of the silly anime stuff and the serious dark storyline with Slade. After they got rid of Slade, it kind of jumped the shark a little bit, but that was probably, I mean, it's right up there with Batman the Animated Series and the Timverse, as far as best cartoons. So, anyways,
that was number
sorry.
1. Number 2?
That was number 1, and I think that's going to end up being one of those that is bad, but it's so bad it's good.
Oh, I'll watch that.
Yeah. My number 2 idea. Like I said earlier, I did think they would go with some kind of occupation of Earth because I didn't see how the Federation could win. And then they did win, so I got to thinking, what's next? And the Breen were a really undeveloped storyline.
Yeah.
They remained mysterious throughout the end. They had this technology that could one-shot just about any ship it ran into, and all of a sudden the war's over. Well, if there are fans like me who weren't happy with the war being over, there were probably some Starfleet officers who weren't happy with the war being over. You know, the Klingons are never happy when the war is over.
Right.
So I had this image in my head that the Federation could build a fleet to find the Breen and stop. They want to keep fighting. This facet of the Federation wants to keep fighting, and they discover that the Breen are not actually from the Alpha Quadrant at all. Their homeworld in the Alpha Quadrant is a colony, and they come from outside the galaxy.
Huh.
So they have to go to this other galaxy with this Federation warship with a crew that has some Romulan elements, some Klingon elements, and they're taking the war to the Breen. The warship was what I was really focusing on. It had some of the aspects similar to what Ben was mentioning with his pitch. The main armament of the ship was a holographic cannon. Instead of a holodeck being one little room, it's 3 decks of the ship that can make any kind of gun you want and shoot out any kind of energy you want.
Right.
Which would be great as an anti-Borg weapon if you think about it. Instead of varying the frequency, you can change up the entire weapon system you're using. So the Federation has that.
Right.
The other nice thing would be an oversized shuttle bay that could fit a Klingon bird of prey in there.
Hey, quick! Load the bad graphics from the '60s can.
Yeah. Because I mean, you get to thinking about some of the weapons you see that never got developed. The original series had that Romulan plasma torpedo. The Federation.
Oh, that was heinous.
The Enterprise had to throw it in a full reverse, and if they got lucky, they could run away far enough that when it finally hit them, it would barely hurt them. But given the power consumption levels, the ship, I guess the Romulans discontinued it because you didn't see much of that anymore. But if you've got a souped-up warship, you're going to have the power requirements where you could fire such a weapon. And in the shuttle bay is this nice little, one of those small Klingon bird of preys, like what Kirk stole. That way, when you need a smaller ship to sneak into a planet, you pop out the bird of prey, cloak it, and head down to the planet undetected.
Right.
So I'd go down to the weapons deck, and I'd be all like, guns, lots of guns.
Yeah.
And maybe you could have, the first season is them traveling to the place. The cliffhanger of the first season is they arrive,
Yeah, they arrive in the galaxy. Everything in the first season is fighting the breed and figuring out where they think the homeworld isn't the homeworld. Then we got to go to this other place and figure out that it's actually on the other side of the galaxy, or in another galaxy. Yeah.
Right.
Would you add
That's-
my crazy idea with adding the Keegans? I mean, the Delanceys. Adding Keegan Delancey as a regular and John as a guest.
I don't want to steal that idea from you, but it would be. I mean, I think there would be ways to work in some other. Some of the classic references. You got to have Q show up in at least one, even if it's original Q and not Q Junior. Part of what got me thinking about this in the first place is how similar the Breen costume is to Princess Leia's bunny hunter outfit in Return of the Jedi. So, what if the Breen come from a galaxy far, far away, and they've been in space since a long time ago?
Oh no!
I would never go full
Crossover.
Star Trek Star Wars thing, but that was my process. What if the Breen are just not from our galaxy?
Well, Ben
All
wants
these
the
aliens in our
crossover.
galaxy we think are from here.
I think
And then
that would be a really interesting concept for a show. It adds to the mystery of the breed. Not that they needed it, but it also gives us a little bit of information about them too. So you learn more, and it doesn't detract from the mystery. I think that's brilliant.
And then it turns out that all the Earth people are actually shapeshifters back on Earth. We're not really from Earth at all.
That
Well,
was
that's even better.
I'm
given how many times in the original series they ran to an Earth-like planet that was a copy of Earth right down to the land masses.
Oh yeah.
What if Earth isn't really the original Earth? What if we're another copy of the original planet that's out there somewhere?
That
Oh, I
sounds.
meant like everyone except the ship that the show takes place on. All the Earth people that weren't actually on that ship aren't real Earth people. That yeah. Goofy idea.
That'll work.
Anyway, sorry. I was just
I
trying to
agree.
throw something crazy out.
Unless anybody else has anything on this one.
No, I think it's a really interesting concept.
Idea 3. One of the first Star Trek novels ever written, like way back in the 70s, was called The Vulcan Academy Murders. I don't know if you guys remember that title or have read any of the old 1970s books.
Not very many.
No.
Title's not even ringing a bell. I might
Sorry.
even have it wrong. It might be Vulcan Science Academy Murders, but it was basically a Star Trek murder mystery. Some Vulcan is going around killing somebody, if I remember. I mean, I read it when I was a little kid, but it was like a Vulcan who wasn't acting out of logic but was acting out of emotion, something like that. But it got me to thinking, we've had episodes that have dealt with Starfleet Academy. Why not have a series about the Academy? You follow 5 or 6 freshmen as they go in, and you'd work in your guest appearances by other series stars as guest lecturers or whatever. And they would have a series of adventures as cadets exploring old mysteries of the Academy, like what's really kept in the sub-basement that nobody ever talks about, all the little urban legends every college has.
Hogwarts.
That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah, it would be that's the thing. It would be Harry Potter. It would be Star Trek Harry Potter. And honestly, I would rather have it be Star Trek Harry Potter than the other possibility where it turns into Star Trek 90210.
Huh. Yeah, well, it'd be like the Tiny Toon Adventures version of Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a younger crew. You'd have some older people there, but it would be following a younger, quote unquote, hipper generation of Star Trek personnel as they go through the Academy. Because I mean, when we have Academy stories, they were typically interesting. There was Wesley Crusher's Alpha Squad incident.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
If anybody remembers that one.
Yeah. Wait, that wasn't Wesley. That was when that was from DS9. Alpha Squad was DS9.
No,
They
Red Squad
were
was
Red.
DS9. Alpha
Oh,
Squad.
my
Alpha
bad.
Squad.
My bad. Alpha
Yeah,
Squad.
You're talking
Alpha
about
was
Nick
thinking of it.
Locarno's organization.
they were
Okay,
going to do
well,
the
Yep.
Starburst formation, and they ended up killing one of their friends because
Albert?
they were trying a dangerous piloting maneuver.
right. Well, what the first thing
Ovoid
Paramount would do to this,
Starburst.
the first thing Paramount would do to this would say, wait a minute, let's do this as a CG show for kids that would adapt the Star Trek Starfleet Academy books into an animated series.
You're really hooked on
Well,
this CG thing, aren't you?
Well, it just seems like the obvious place for Star Trek to go next. It really does. And there's been books about the Academy. There's been tons of books about the Academy, and there's been a series, a whole series about the adventures of the Star Trek Next Generation crew as little guys at the Academy. And it's for younger readers. And I don't think I would have wanted to read them when I was a kid, but I guess some do. And it doesn't make it's sort of like the Smallville version, because they get to know each other before they're supposed to, in some situations. So yeah, it didn't make much sense, but it was fun, I guess.
Cool.
So they probably turn that into a TV series if they went with this rather than going with new people don't know. They'd animate them. They'd get new voice actors to sound like younger versions of the people from the old shows, and that'd be it.
As long as they do it right, because I don't need to find out that, Captain Kirk is really Picard's father. Okay, when I found out that Darth Vader built C-3PO, that's when I was done. I mean, I was,
no.
I was. That's part of why I can't stand the fact that he's got Indiana Jones fighting Russians instead of Nazis. George Lucas has lost his mind.
All right, so that was 3 of your 4 ideas, right?
Yes.
So what
Get
was
one more
your
in.
grand finale?
Number 4, and I think the show that would be probably the best would be to not have a central theme to the show at all. It's going to be something like The Outer Limits or The Twilight Zone. Every week you're going to see an episode in the Star Trek universe of something going on that's not necessarily connected to other episodes. One day you're going to have a Klingon cruiser investigating an abandoned asteroid. The next episode is going to be about a Federation doctor going to a medical review board. It's going to be something like The Outer Limits or The Twilight Zone, where you're going to have different directors come in, different actors come in. It's going to be each episode is its own series. So it would be a nice test bed to get a feel for what sort of long-term series an audience might want to watch if after 3 or 4 seasons of this you decide this was really cool, people like this story, let's make it a full-fledged series. It would give you a test bed to tell a lot of different stories. Any story you want to tell in Star Trek, you don't have to try to come up with some contrivance to put a specific crew into that story or
Yeah, they should do
That's a
that.
good
The
point.
DC Comics people should do that rather than trying to do a Green Lantern show, which made no sense. Oh,
there are so many things that would make for a great episode, so many interesting stories to tell, but how do you get the crew where they need to be to tell this story?
spatial
I mean,
anomaly.
Yeah. And after a while, that's part of one of the things that people tend to it's part of the TV tropes, in Star Trek, a red shirt's always going to die. They're always just going to reverse the polarity and that'll solve the problem, but at the same time, some of these situations how many times are the holodecks going to malfunction and risk the lives of the people trapped inside
Exactly.
before you put in a backup safety filter for the holodecks?
They did. It just failed because the writer said it failed.
Yeah. And
The question is, how many times before you get rid of the holodecks? You see, those things are dangerous. It made no sense to keep them.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
they're
it-
just
this
for
would be
entertainment.
But I
This
see what
would
you're
be a
saying,
super-
Bill, because it's like what was that Enterprise episode where all of a sudden they're in the Old West on a different planet. I mean, really? I think
Yeah.
the writers just were really hard up for writing a Western story, and
You know what I would do if I was a director on that show? I would get
shoot
Robert
myself.
Downey Jr. Oh
Oh,
no,
sorry. What?
no,
No.
I'd get Robert Downey Jr. to play a Tony Starkish type character who is a holo novel author, and he's getting in his super holodeck, which is way cooler than any of the ones that have ever been on any of the ships because those have to be like portable in space. This is a stationary one that's top of the line. So he gets and starts writing his holo novel, but the characters start like writing themselves, and it turns out he's contacted an alien race that communicates through stories or something like that. And how does he handle this? And are they friendly? Are they not? It seems like they're trying to kill him, or maybe there's more than one aliens, or But yeah, that's sort of the premise, and he's gotta figure it out by interacting with his own characters that he started to create. He's got to figure out what's the deal with these aliens and what can he do about it. And yeah, and
Absolutely. I mean, it would make for a great episode, maybe even a two-parter or a three-parter. But I mean, it's how do you build a series around it? That's the.
yeah. Well, see, this wouldn't be a series. This story wouldn't work for a series, but it would work
But
on
it
a
would
show
fit.
like that.
It would fit into a montage. And there are old episodes that I would like to see revisited. Like we could go back, like you were saying, with
The Gangster Planet.
the Gangster Planet, the Ionians. Were that them or was that somebody else?
I don't know what they're called. They're the Gangster Planet. Just go with it.
Yeah.
Star Trek Next Generation
Thanks.
season 1, the little beetle insect things that
Yeah,
burrowed into the back of your neck.
I would love to
Conspiracy.
see something more on that. I've heard that there was a
yeah,
novel written
sure.
about it, but I
Those were
haven't read it.
icky.
Oh, that'd be.
I mean, they end that episode saying they were sending a deep space beacon, and I can't remember if they said Gamma Quadrant or Delta Quadrant, but they were sending a deep space beacon to their home world on the other side of the galaxy, and they never got around to it on Deep Space Nine, which was the Delta Quadrant or the Gamma Quadrant, and they never got around to it on Voyager, which was the Delta Quadrant. But somewhere out there are these mind-controlling bug symbiotes.
You know,
Where
maybe
are
Ben's ship that travels beyond our galaxy can run into them.
Yeah, I mean, we got to find
Scary.
these are old follow-ups that need to be done. Visit a planet that
They slowly infiltrate, and you start to wonder if who you can trust and things like that. Oh yeah, I like it.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
and that's, I mean, I think that the montage, the start, just call it I don't know what you would call it. It would need a title, you know.
Star
I
Trek
mean, we got
stories.
Star Trek
something like that. Star
Yeah,
Trek
we got
Tales.
Star Trek Occupation. We've got Star Trek Andromeda. We've got Star Trek Tales. I mean, it's got to have some kind of hook in the title that says this is Star
This
Trek.
isn't your grandfather's Star
universe.
Trek.
Yeah, it's
Wait.
at
What?
each episode.
Oh. Your show that goes all over the place with individual episodes. What would it be called?
Yeah,
I'd call it Star Trek Universe.
seeing if it weren't for Stargate taking that title
Yeah, I
already,
think that wouldn't fly.
That's the-
unfortunately.
I mean, it
Well,
is the Star
okay.
Trek universe, but it's got to be. But I think of
Uh,
all possible, because I mean, they try. I mean, it would give you an opportunity to do fan service because the worst episodes of Enterprise were the ones where they said, "Oh, okay, we're going to do something the fans really, 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 really want," and so they gave us a Ferengi episode, and I just wanted to punch somebody.
Yeah.
They
well,
never ran
yeah.
into the Ferengi until Picard did so, and now, oh yeah, well, we did it 300 years ago, and we outsmarted them because they were
Yeah.
idiots. And I'm just,
Yeah, it's not.
they
cool.
did that as fan service. They wanted to, oh, we want Ferengis, we want to see this, we want to see that. Well, we want to tell you a story. We don't want your story. Give us what we want, which is part of why that show, it was trying too hard to make people happy, and so Enterprise did
Well,
have.
That's because the story they were trying to tell mostly sucked.
Yeah.
But, Star Trek has a
So-
history of having to change the titles of its or change various things about it because of another show. I believe originally the Obsidian Order was originally going to be called the Gray Order, but they changed the name because Babylon 5 had the Gray Council.
Right.
And also,
Obsidian Order's cooler anyway.
yeah, I kind of like it better myself too.
Yeah.
Star Trek 2 was originally going to be called The Revenge of Khan. And they had heard that Lucas was producing a film called The Revenge of the Jedi. And they said, well, we got to change the name to The Wrath of Khan. And then what happens to Lucas's film? He changes it to Return of the Jedi. What can you do?
Wrath of Khan sounds cooler anyway.
Yeah, I like it too. It's a lot more anger in it.
Yeah, I mean, uh, okay. Let's Star Trek Presents seems like the other obvious title. It's
I
not
like
cooler.
that. Star Trek Presents.
Yeah, I mean it's not cooler or anything, but it's sort of like the DC Showcase features they've been doing that come with the DC animated movies they're making. DC Showcase is just sort of one shot 10 15-minute story about a character that's one of the big characters but not big enough to have their own movie. So they make a little 15-minute show about him, and if that show gets enough buzz, enough hype, then they might possibly make a movie out of them in the future. Some of those have been really good. I like the one about the Spectre. That was cool. Can we see an animated version of the Spectre? I don't think we've ever seen him in animation before, have we?
I'm trying to think if he was in Justice League at all.
I don't think so. If he was, it must have been just a cameo. Because I
Yeah,
think
it
I
might have been like. Yeah, I don't think he's ever done anything. He's sort of Marvel or DC's version of the Watcher, except he doesn't do as much as the Watcher does.
Yeah, well, yeah. He shows up. He shows up for the Crisis. The Crisis is. He's like, yeah. He's really usually only reserved for like cosmic universe level events.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
There is one more thing I'd like to put out there for folks to think about. I want to see if anybody else has any more pitches before we do it.
Yeah.
I
I think we put.
would like to see. Oh, I'd like to
Same
see
here.
some more Star Trek audiobooks with the full voice cast.
Yeah, it's a damn shame. I go to audible.com and I want to get some nice Star Trek stories to read because I know there have been hundreds of books published in each of the timelines, but the only ones that are available are all uh, abridged. So that does not appeal to me.
Oh yeah, yeah. That you need the
That's
full book.
There are a
And-
few that are narrated by people I like. There's one that's narrated by Renee Bergenwald. And I did read that one. That was cool. But right now, I'm getting my book fix on the iPad. I'm going to the iBook store and downloading them. Just reading
Yeah,
them.
I don't support Audible.com because of the DRM. That was a deal breaker for me. There's a bunch of stuff I would buy from them if they dropped the DRM, but they're not doing that, so I'm not buying from them.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, there is one more thing I want to ask you guys just to
Yeah.
throw out there.
Go ahead.
I know Brandon mentioned it briefly. And eventually we might have to get into talking about the new Star Trek movie. But I don't want to talk about the new Star Trek movie and do any deconstruction on it. But what I would like to ask is, these movies, they're going to make 2 or 3 more. And as
2 or 3 more, but they'd make like 3 of them, and then they'd probably reboot it again.
Yeah.
well, it depends. I mean,
The way
it
things are going
depends on
lately.
what happens because, I mean, everybody else is doing reboots, but the fans are getting sick and fed up of reboots. And if this works, they might be able to stretch it out into 5 or 6 movies and make everybody involved lots and lots of money. Which is, but the thing is, they are going to be making sequels to this, and so whether or not you like or don't like the new Star Trek, what would you like to see in the new Star Trek movies? with this.
Could I just say one thing about the first Star Trek real quick? The only thing I really strongly disliked about it was how it connected with the old universe, which was basically to wipe it all out. I'd rather have not even had.
Spoiler alert for
Leonard
anyone who
Nimoy.
hasn't seen it, but you know.
Well, to be honest, though, I understand
Everybody's
why they
seen
did what
it.
they did. The whole reason they did what they did is, it was like Ben said, what made Enterprise, or was it Brandon who said it? We knew where the show is going. You know how it's going to end up at the end of it all, so it loses some of that dramatic tension.
Mm-hmm.
By claiming to be an alternate universe, now you got to sit there and worry, are they going to kill off a main character? Even though you know they're not going to kill off a main character when they've got a ship full of red shirts. So they had to do the reboot that way to make you worry and kind of to say, oh, this is a different universe. Anything could happen. Anybody could die. Kirk might not live to the end of these movies. And this way it'll...
Yeah,
they might
actually,
I mean,
Malcolm McDowell might come along and kill him again, for all we know.
yeah.
We'll save the whole Star Trek movie topic for another show, because that would definitely fill up a whole show by itself.
The Star Trek pitch.
Talking about the 2009 movie and the upcoming sequels.
The upcoming one, yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it. It just makes me sad that the old universe feels wiped out, which makes you feel like all the old shows, all the things people did.
We'll discuss that on
felt like
later
it was
on.
all for nothing.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone. Thank you for listening to us tonight. I'd also like to thank our hosts this evening, especially considering how half of us are battling illness. Thank you for taking out of your recuperation to spend it with us. And to all of our fans, we'd like to invite you to check out our website, Trekosophy.com, where episodes are available, and we're adding new features as we grow. Also, we are found on Facebook at facebook.com/group/Trekosophy. And you can follow us on Twitter at Trekosophy. And email any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, complaints,
snores,
photos of your homemade starships to Trekosophy@gmail.com. Thank you and good night.
Live long and prosper.
Alright, the recorder is now up and running.
Oh, hell.
Yeah, it always struck me as more of a, oh, hey, let's throw in another reminder that we're in the 50s now, because we haven't made enough random, pointless references to the 1950s just yet.
Benjamin. What, I'll give you a dummy username and you can change it once you log in. Brandon, if you want. Sorry, I said Benjamin earlier, I meant Brandon. Got too many B's in here. Brandon.
We're really beat for this whole... Does anyone play the CCG game here?
No, what the heck is that?
Oh, click.
There's a Star Trek CG?
Yeah.
Really?
You guys didn't know there was a Star Trek CCG?
You know, now that you mention it, I kind of do remember something about that.
Huh.
Kind of.
It was very good, though. I mean, it was chock full of good information.
I don't know why. The more I dislike something, the better I remember it. I don't know why, but there you have it.
One thing I should do is follow Michael Dom, however we say his name.
Dorn.
Yeah, Michael Dorn.
Arms with Morn.
Makes you wonder if that's a coincidence.
They are excellent sparring partners.
Trekosophy, the Star Trek podcast, where people can fall asleep.
I'd be up for getting this episode rolling.
Hey, cool. You can add Twitter to the site so that our tweets appear on Trekosophy.com.
Yep.
Yay.
can do that.
Indiana Jones 4 wasn't that great of a movie. Didn't live up to the originals, but
Made,
I
it
kinda
made
like
Temple of
fighting
Doom look good.
Oh crap! The internet is killing us.
Oh, do you want to hear a totally lame idea? I'm
You
flexible,
want-
but
You've got the F's in there with it.
as long as I've got lots of F's, I'm really apt for this.
I'm getting off topic though. I should stop. Oh, don't get me started on my George Lucas's evil rants.
We'll save
I
that
guess
for
I really
another
don't.
episode.
I'm not feeling quite so optimistic about the ideas I pitched because I put Brandon to sleep with them.
Oh.
So that bodes well for my ability to come up with a clever idea.
I think that had a lot more to do with the clock than anything else.
Yeah.
Well, the clock, and he did say he was half sick to begin with, so I'm not feeling.
did
I
say
feel bad for. Oh, he's awake.
Oh, here I am.
Insert random snoring noises and fade out on what I'm saying.
Trying to get us registered. Register of bod. It destination.
I want to repeat
Certainly
that.
does.
What? Okay, I just want to make sure that I don't have the whole thing where I'm going what or giggling or anything like I've done in every other episode so far. Trying to avoid that, so yeah. So if I don't have to say anything, that's cool. Yeah, I used to have some other address before